Hello, I'm Callista. My family laughed at my old Buick and quietly wrote me out. No invites, no group texts, just smiles with sharp edges. When I pushed back, they forged receipts and called me a liar, so I kept the records, saved my breath, and lit one careful match. If it were your name on the line, what would you do? Charleston holds on to summer like kin who won't leave the porch. Heat and memory pressed my cheeks as I turned into Vera's street of neat hedges and perfect swings. My Buick hummed an apology beside the polished SUVs. I parked under crepe myrtles. Petals fell like confetti from a party I hadn't attended. The wheel was warm, its leather cracked where my Uncle Arthur's hands once gripped. He gave me the Buick with a shrug and one request: treat it kindly. Before my foot found the driveway, I heard laughter. Thin, bright, just sharp enough to carry. A knot of cousins stood by the garage with red cups, their shoulders tipped toward the car. One shook his head as if watching a dog try to climb a ladder. I closed the door and clicked the lock because the Buick is old enough to ask for ceremony. The slam turned heads. "Look what wandered out of a museum," a cousin called, smiling like a dare. "Be nice," another said, the words hovering between care and mockery. I lifted my chin and walked up the warm brick, fireflies stitching over Vera's hydrangeas. I promised myself not to start the night with a scene. Uncle Arthur used to say we set our tone early or the room sets it for us. Vera met me halfway, barefoot in linen, porch light finding her. She hugged only my shoulders. "You made it," she said. "I worried the Buick would stall at the gate. Is it registered as a classic or as farm equipment?" The cousins laughed. Someone pantomimed pulling a cord. Heat rose in my face like I'd leaned too near the grill. I smiled because fights about cars are never about cars. "It still runs on respect," I said. "Rare fuel these days." Her eyebrows flicked. "Cute." She turned before the word cooled, already calling toward the kitchen, already hosting. She gathers people like lanterns until you have to shout over the light. Inside, the air was lemon oil and roasted corn. Vera's fiancé, Graham, lifted a hand. He is quick with charm. It rarely plugs into me. "Fix a plate," Vera called. The kitchen filled and thinned like tide. When the crush eased, I stepped in. "Callista," she said. She uses my full name in public, as if I might misplace it. "We need something photogenic to drive off in after the ceremony." Graham's brother offered his convertible. "Think you could tuck the heirloom behind the hedges? The photographer's already here." I set a plate down and placed exactly one shrimp on it. "The heirloom can stay at the curb," I said. "It belonged to the man who taught us to say thank you before we said please." "For the record," a cousin offered, "my mower is shinier." Laughter again. And the old smallness tugged, the grade school memory of being told to smile bigger so I wouldn't ruin Vera's solo pictures. Children don't know the price card on silence until the register rings years later. I glanced at the sage cabinets, the framed marsh prints, the stools where we once peeled shrimp without anyone performing. "That car got me to 2 job interviews the month after Arthur died," I said, still calm. When my radiator blew, he came with work gloves and a thermos. He said a car's a promise to show up. I plan to keep it. "Of course you do," Vera said, agreeing in a way that made the sentiment hers. I stepped back to the porch. Evening lowered its chin on the rooftops. Pink gave way to blue. From the steps, I could see the Buick under the myrtles, a dark, honest shape. A memory of my mother arrived, braiding my hair before school. "You don't need to be loud to be seen," she said, "but you do need to look up." The screen brushed my shoulder. Graham stood beside me, careful and kind. "They're excited," he said. "Sometimes excitement makes people foolish. I've noticed. You okay?" "I'm deciding," I said. "About tone." He nodded. "Some folks hear soft voices. Some only hear thunder." He went back inside. The quiet that remained felt different. Less like being left out, more like being left alone on purpose. I traced the Buick's line with my eyes, the hood I wax by hand, the door that sticks on damp days, the dimple in the fender. I didn't bring it to impress anyone. I brought it because it tells the truth about where I come from and who showed up for me. Truth is inconvenient at parties. The screen door opened again. Vera slipped out, phone in hand. Quick question, she said, eyes on the screen. If Aunt Joy asks about toasts, can you keep yours brief? We're tight on the run of show. I hadn't planned a toast. Good, she said, already typing. She lifted the phone for a backyard photo, caught the Buick in the frame and lowered it with a sigh. Could you at least angle it? The plates are distracting. They belong to a man who served this state, I said. They distract me in the best way. She tucked the phone into her pocket and studied me. For a second, the porch light didn't flatter either of us. Try not to make tonight about statements, she said gently. Just let it be pretty. I'm not here for pretty, I said. I'm here for family. That's what pretty is, she answered and left. I ate the one shrimp. Smoke, salt, a metal edge of memory. A boy streaked across the grass with a sparkler. His father's soft scold trailed him. Wind chimes answered a breeze. In the window, my reflection stood beside Vera's, both of us in the same light, one face practiced, one plain. I folded the napkin small, slid it into my pocket, and straightened. I knew this night would test more than just my patience. And I was right. Barely 15 minutes in, the first real cut came. Vera's patio glowed under strings of white bulbs, the kind you see in magazines where no mosquito ever makes the guest list. The grill hissed, the air heavy with brown sugar rub and smoke, and music drifted from a speaker tucked behind a planter. People arranged themselves the way they always do at our gatherings, a bright center of laughter near Vera, then rings that dimmed the farther you sat. My chair waited on the fringe, a little cafe table next to the recycling bin. It wobbled when I set down my tea. I told myself it was fine. I've eaten in worse places with better company. From my edge seat, I could see the driveway through Vera's side gate. The Buick sat where I left it, paint dulled by years and sun, the tiny military plates catching the porch light like a wink. I kept my gaze there whenever the conversation near the bar got too loud, or when a cousin shouted my name followed by "bless her heart," which in our family is just a pretty way to say something mean. Vera made an entrance the way she always does, like the party had been circling until she arrived to give it a reason. She kissed cheeks, lifted a tray like a trophy, and let her voice float over the music. We did a purge last weekend, she announced to the cluster around her. It's funny what we keep, you know. Sentimental junk, old cars, old stories, old everything. Some people never move on. The laugh that followed was practiced, the kind that invites others to join without understanding the punchline. A few did. I watched Brent, her shadow of a cousin, turn in my direction as if to check whether the line had landed. He's the sort who laughs with his mouth open and his eyes closed, like he's afraid to see who might not be laughing back. Our gazes met for a second. I sipped my tea and didn't blink. Plates made their rounds. An aunt I barely recognized handed me coleslaw with the caution of a flight attendant passing hot coffee in turbulence. I balanced everything on the rocking table and kept my shoulders square. The trick is not to shrink. You sit up, you breathe evenly. You let the sting settle where it can't be seen. Aunt Lucille drifted over, short and neat and sharp as a new pin. She's earned the right to say what she thinks, and she likes to spend it. Charleston changes so fast, she said, eyes on my shoes. Hard to keep up with the times, isn't it? Depends on what you're trying to keep, I said. Some things are worth the pace. She smiled without showing teeth. Sentiment will bury a woman quicker than debt. Then she patted my shoulder, as if she'd just praised me, and moved on to the dessert table. I could have told her my car wasn't sentiment. It was a promise. Uncle Arthur gave it to me the week he learned he wouldn't see another spring. He said, keep something that was built to last and let it remind you that you were too. I kept the story to myself because Vera collects stories and resells them for likes. Some things don't belong to her. A burst of cheers rose near the grill. Vera raised a pair of tongs like a mayor cutting a ribbon. Beach week is a go, she called. I'll post the details in the thread, same as last year, plus the new rules about bedrooms. Laughter rolled across the patio, and someone asked who had the key to the family place. It's on the schedule, Vera said. Check the thread. A younger cousin brushed past me with a tray. You bringing your famous biscuits, Callista? She asked, more out of politeness than interest. I didn't know we had dates yet, I said. Oh, she blinked, balancing burger buns. It's all in the family chat. She tilted her chin toward Vera's circle, like the chat lived there in the light. I slid my phone from my pocket. No new notifications besides a weather alert and a client email. I scrolled through text chains with familiar names, work, a neighbor, my mechanic, and an old family thread that fizzled out months ago after a fight about who forgot to bring ice. Nothing recent. I typed family in the search bar. The same dead thread bloomed up like a dried flower. No new petals. Brent had drifted closer, arms crossed. You missed the memo, he said. Vera's got a new thread, makes it easier to manage. Manage what? I asked. He shrugged, pleased with his vague power. Everything. I stood to help clear plates because if I stayed seated, I would calcify. The patio stones held the day's heat under my sandals. Inside, the kitchen glowed the way kitchens do during parties, bright, crowded, self-pleased. I stacked paper plates, scraped ribs into the trash, and listened without appearing to listen. Two cousins at the sink compared grocery runs for the beach week. Don't forget the coffee, one said. And the air mattress, the other answered. Vera said the list is pinned. Pinned where? I asked, light as a breeze. They both smiled. In the thread, they said in unison, as if reciting a hymn. I rinsed my hands and dried them carefully. Would you mind adding me? I asked. I don't see it. Oh, one of them said, the word shaped like a sympathy card. It's not my thread. Vera's the admin, the other added, like it was a title one earned by merit. Ask her. Back at my wobbling table, I watched Vera hold court, sun catching the gold in her hair and the gold on her wrist and the gold on the neck of the friend who laughed too hard at nothing. She was telling a story about a deal that fell into her lap because she'd put herself in the right rooms. The idea that rooms are right because she is in them has always been her magic trick. I could have marched across the patio then and asked, plain as bread, why did you leave me out? But people who arrange rooms to their advantage also stage the scene for the fallout. I wouldn't give her the pleasure of an audience. I wanted my words to land in a place with walls that listened, not in a ring that applauded. So I cleared more dishes. I thanked the uncle at the grill. I let Aunt Lucille's remarks pass through me like a stiff wind through a screen door. When I had done enough small, ordinary kindness to cover my own conscience, I stepped beyond the gate to breathe. The night hummed. The Buick waited, patient as always. A moth worried the porch light over the garage, then gave up and drifted toward the darker end of the yard. From the driveway, I could hear Vera announcing bedroom assignments like a game show host. People clapped in the way people clap when a winner has already been chosen. I placed my palm on the Buick's warm hood and felt the sting in my chest settle into something steadier. Exclusion is one kind of message. It says, we're fine without you. But there are messages that answer back without raising their voice. I opened the trunk and checked that the envelope was still where I'd tucked it, beneath the jumper cables and a folded blanket. The paper had softened at the edges from being handled, but the ink was as firm as the day it was written. I slipped it back, shut the trunk, and looked once more at the patio lights that made everything seem festive, even when it wasn't. I walked inside with a plate of watermelon as if that was all I had gone out to fetch. Brent clocked my return. Vera lifted an eyebrow that asked, "Are you calm yet?" I smiled at both of them and took my seat on the edge, a patient witness to a show I no longer needed to join. They cut me out of a message thread. It happens. Threads tangle, threads can be snipped. But some ties run deeper than scheduled posts and pinned lists, deeper than rooms arranged to flatter one person's face. They live in paper and signatures and the steadiness of a promise. I traced the condensation ring my tea glass had left on the table and let the circle fade. They thought they could write me out like I was nothing, but they had no idea what I was holding, because sometimes the past they mock is the same past that can undo them. I kept hearing my own words as the rain came soft and steady against my windows. The apartment was quiet except for the low hum of the refrigerator and the tick of the wall clock I never remembered to wind. I set a mug of tea on the table and slid my keys beside it, the old key fob still stamped with the base emblem. Vera had laughed at that emblem once. Funny how a small thing can hold the line when the bigger things fall apart. I told myself to let the night go. Breathe, wash the dishes, answer a client email, sleep. My body tried to obey. My mind did not. It kept running the tape from the backyard, pausing at the practiced smile on Vera's face, the way Brent studied me like a referee waiting for a foul. It should have stung more than it did. Instead, it concentrated into something small and heavy, like a coin I turned over in my palm. Decision has that weight. The photo on my bookcase drew me in. It was sun-faded, the corners softened by time. Me at 20, leaning against the Buick with both hands spread on the hood as if it might lift off. Next to me, Uncle Arthur stood straight in his pressed khakis, chin tipped toward the horizon. The base flag was a bright slash of color behind us, and the sky that day looked cleaned and ironed, not a wrinkle to be found. He had called me to the motor pool without warning. I remember jogging across the concrete, the smell of rubber and hot oil, the clank of a dropped wrench somewhere inside the open bay. Arthur was never one for speeches or surprises, which is why the sight of the Buick waiting there felt like a door left open in winter. I ran a hand along the fender, my reflection warped in the paint. "It's yours," he said, and when I laughed, he didn't. "I mean it, kid. Paperwork's signed, plates are handled." "I can't take your car," I said. "I don't even know what to say." "Then listen," he answered. "You won't always be able to choose the road, but you can choose what carries you. Choose something that answers to you, not to anyone else's pride." I knew what he meant, even if neither of us spoke the name. That morning at breakfast, my father had explained, with a certainty that left no space for error, why my plans were impractical and my timeline immature. It was not the first conversation like that, and not the last, but on that day, it landed hard. Arthur had been there, stirring his coffee, not arguing, just watching. When he handed me the keys, he made it simple. "You drive your own road," he said. "And when the road pushes back, you keep driving." I asked him why the Buick. He grinned then, a rare boyish thing that made the lines at his eyes fold in. "Because it's a little stubborn and it was built to last," he said. "Remind you of anyone?" I kept the laugh that time, even as my throat tightened. We signed the forms in an office that smelled like toner and dust and a little bit of old coffee. The clerk congratulated me as if I had bought a house. When I turned the ignition for the first time, the engine settled into a decent, honest rumble. I could feel it under my hands, under my ribcage. That was the day the car became more than a car. It was a permission slip to take myself seriously. Vera found out 3 weeks later at a family cookout. The memory came back in full color the more I let it. The yard was loud with children and lawn games, and the grill smoked like a small cloud bank. Vera tried to make a show of welcoming Arthur the way she always did with anyone of rank or reputation. She steered him toward the patio, framed him in good light, lifted her voice just enough for the neighbors to hear. I remember her hand on his arm. I remember how he shifted a half step, not unkind, to take his arm back. "So, Arthur," she said, smiling at him and the imaginary lens she kept aimed over her shoulder. "Callista tells me you found a car for her. How generous." "Not found," he said. "Gave. The right tool for the right job." "How sweet," she answered. "I keep telling her to let go of the old things, but she insists on holding on." "She knows what she's holding," he said. "Not everyone does." Vera's smile trembled for the briefest second. She recovered, of course. She always does. She asked him about his last posting and the visiting dignitary and the ribbon cutting at the hospital wing. He answered, polite and spare. When a neighbor asked for a photo, Vera slid in between them like mist. Arthur obliged. Then he turned to me and asked if I had checked the oil. It was the smallest thing, but it was not. A line drawn in chalk that day hardened over time into paint. Rain deepened against my windows. I took the photo down and set it on the table next to my tea. The mug had gone cold. I didn't mind. Cold tea wakes you up if you let it. I thought about the way Vera's remark last night circled the Buick but never landed on Arthur. She never mentions him now, not in public, not even in her carefully edited stories about our family's history. He is an inconvenient fact that disturbs the narrative. People like Vera will bend an entire conversation around a missing piece so they never have to say its name. The funny thing about missing pieces is that they do not stay missing when you carry them with care. I had more than the car. I had the papers he kept tidy in the glove box, the service tags, the letter he wrote in his square, patient hand the week after he signed the title over. Keep the maintenance, keep your head, keep your word. They were instructions, but they were also a kind of blessing. He gave me what my father would not give and what my sister could not fake. The difference is not small. A soft knock sounded at my door. I opened it to find Marlene holding a plastic container and a folded umbrella. Her gray hair curled damp around her face. "You look like you could use bad cobbler and better company," she said. "I can't promise I'll be talkative," I told her. "Then I'll talk and you can roll your eyes," she said, stepping in and setting the container on the counter. "How was the royal gathering?" "Predictable," I said. "Performative, pretty, and mean in a way that leaves no fingerprints." Marlene clicked her tongue. "Bless their hearts," she said, and because she is from here, I knew she meant the opposite. She poured herself water and took the chair by the window. "Did you see it coming?" "I always see it coming," I said. "I just keep hoping they won't do what they always do." "You're not powerless," she said. "You never were." "I know." I reached for the photo without thinking and turned it so she could see. Sometimes I forget that what I carry is real just because they pretend it isn't. She studied the picture a long moment. "He looks like the kind of man who told the truth even when it cost him," she said. "He was," I answered, "and he handed me a little of that truth the day he gave me this car." "Then quit hiding it," she said gently. "Light does more good out of the drawer." I nodded. An old restlessness moved through me, the kind that makes you clean a closet at midnight or draft an email you have needed to write for years. I picked up my phone and typed a message to Marlene even though she was sitting 6 feet away. It felt right to send it, to make a record that would live somewhere other than the soft space of our kitchen talk. It's time I stopped letting them write my story for me. Her phone buzzed. She read it and smiled without a sound. "About time," she said. I put the photo back in its frame and returned it to the shelf. The rain began to ease. Streetlight pooled on the pavement below, turning the runoff into small silver rivers. I pictured the Buick down there, beads of water tracking the curve of the hood, the plates catching whatever light was left. I breathed in and out until my ribs stopped feeling like a cage. Vera thinks power is the room that listens. Arthur taught me power is the voice that doesn't need the room. I had been hoarding that voice, keeping it safe, as if safety ever changed a bully. It does not. Use changes a bully. Use and the calm that follows. I rinsed the mug and set it upside down on the rack. I turned off the lamp. In the dark, the rain softened to a hush I could barely hear. I let the silence sit with me, not empty but expectant, like the few seconds before a plane lifts, or a verdict is read, or a heart finally tells the truth it has been storing. Because sometimes the past does not just speak. It roars when you need it to. By late Saturday afternoon, the sun turned Vera's kitchen into a glassy stage. Light poured through the tall windows and slid across the marble like it was proud of itself. The air smelled like cornbread and something sweet she'd set out for show. I came in carrying a stack of plates and told myself to keep my chin level. If the past wanted to roar, it would have to do it through me, and it would have to do it clean. Brent leaned against the island with a beer, laughing a half-second too loudly at everything Vera said. I could hear them before they noticed me. Her voice warm honey for the guests, sharp citrus for me. "Some folks can't let go," she said, still facing him. "They keep hauling yesterday into every room like it's a purse." Brent snorted. The laugh slid off me and broke somewhere near the sink. I set the plates down beside the casserole and began unwrapping foil. The kitchen had that magazine brightness Vera loved. White cabinets, brass pulls, the fridge paneled to look like furniture. Every surface reflected someone's idea of perfection. Mine or hers, it was hard to say. She pivoted, finding me as if I'd been called by name. "Callie," she sang, slipping into a tone meant to sound affectionate in front of company. "You still driving that old metal relic around? I swear I heard it coughing at the light." I folded the foil and tucked it under. "If it coughed, it made it home anyway," I said. "A lot of shiny things can't say the same." Her smile was airbrushed calm. You'd know. Aunt Lucille drifted in, smoothing a paper towel over her hands like she was ironing it. Now, girls, she said, not looking at me so much as looking through me. Keeping up with the times is hard for some folks. Not everybody needs the latest, but goodness, a woman has to look like she's trying. I am trying, I said, keeping my voice even. Just not at the same contest. Lucille chuckled like I'd made a cute mistake in arithmetic. You always did love your old things, Callista. Sweet, really. History is only old to the people who never learned from it, I said, lifting a serving spoon and finding somewhere for my hands to be. It landed softer than it sounded in my head, but Vera's mouth tightened anyway. Small victories live on tiny shelves. Brent drifted away to fetch more charcoal, and for a moment the room thinned to just the three of us and the click of the oven settling. Vera rested her palms on the island. I watched her wedding-style manicure catch the sun and thought about how careful she is with edges. Hers, mine, everyone's. Reminder for everyone, she said suddenly, voice rising just enough to catch people in the adjacent room. Beach house trip leaves Friday at 9. We'll carpool from my place. Since some people have schedules and preferences, they've opted out this year. She lifted her eyes to mine like a stage cue. And that's perfectly fine. Conversations in the living room stuttered and then resumed. The words hit me in two places, the twist and the polish. Opted out sounded tidy, less cruel than left out, which is what had actually happened. I put the spoon down carefully. A strip of sunlight lay across the floor like a line drawn with a ruler. I never opted out, I said, quiet enough to be decent, loud enough to be heard. Vera tilted her head. Well, you didn't reply to anything. She widened her eyes toward Aunt Lucille as if statistics were on her side. We sent it all out ages ago. You sent it to everyone in a place I wasn't in, I said. My hands were steady. That's not the same as asking. Aunt Lucille let out a small, oh dear sound. Misunderstandings happen in families constantly, she offered, her voice the temperature of sweet tea. Let's not make drama in the kitchen. I'm not making anything, I said. I came to help set the table. Vera's smile returned, sweeter and thinner. And I'm just hosting. It's a lot to juggle. If you felt excluded, that's unfortunate. I'm sure you'll be happier doing your own thing. I looked at her then, not at the gloss, but at the eyes behind it. For years I'd let conversations be choreographed around me. Laugh tracks supplied, exits plotted, the quiet parts edited out. And my reflection in the oven door was small and upright. There are moments when you realize your back has been straight for a long time and it isn't going to bend now. If you have something to say to me, I said, say it without the performance. The room answered with silence. Even the oven forgot its little clicks. From the patio, a mower hummed somewhere down the block, summer going about its business. Vera's gaze didn't flinch. It cooled. She liked it when I snapped. She didn't know what to do with calm. Performance? She repeated, feathering a laugh. Callie, this is a family kitchen. I'm trying to keep peace. Peace would have been adding my number the first time, I said. Peace would have been asking me if I wanted to go, instead of assuming it would be better if I didn't. Lucille cleared her throat. My pound cake is going to fall if we keep opening and closing this oven, she said to no one in particular, pulling the door just enough to look, then closing it again with a soft scold. She wanted to fix the air, the way she fixes hems, quickly, invisibly. But some rips need to be seen before they can be sewn. Vera leaned in. It's my job to curate experiences that make sense, she said, voice low. I don't owe anyone a seat at everything. That includes you. Understood, I said. Then you'll understand when I stop letting you announce my choices for me. A few cousins wandered in, smelling like smoke from the grill. Brent reappeared carrying a bag of ice, paused long enough to feel the temperature, and then decided he had something to do elsewhere. People can sense a storm even without clouds. I wiped my hands and stepped aside to make room at the island. Do you want these on the table? I asked, pointing to the plates. Vera's eyes slid to the stack. Yes, she said finally. Thank you. I walked them into the dining room, set them down, and breathed once, deep enough to feel my ribs from the inside. Through the doorway, I heard her voice lift again, friendly, effortless, something about homemade salsa and community, something about memories. She was building a scene, and everyone was happy to stand under its string lights. When I came back, she had moved on to a new audience. She did not look at me, which was its own performance. I started arranging forks. Aunt Lucille joined me, her hands quick and organized. "You girls," she murmured, "so different. Oil and water." "Water and vinegar, maybe," I said. "Sometimes you need both." She smiled, a little surprised. "Now that's a thought." I finished aligning the place settings, letting the rhythms settle me. The more I did the quiet job right, the more my mind cleared. It isn't always power to speak first or loudest. Sometimes it's power to choose when not to. My phone buzzed in my pocket. Marlene, a simple check-in. I tapped back that I was fine and that I'd call her later. I would, and I knew exactly what I needed to ask her. By the time the food hit the table, the kitchen had returned to its pleasant hum. People filled plates and offered compliments. Vera floated. I ate slowly and listened, cataloging little remarks, tiny turns, where she nudged a story and where she trimmed it. I wasn't studying her so much as mapping the exits. There's a difference. As dusk softened the edges of the windows, I rose to help tidy the first wave of dishes. Vera and I arrived at the sink at the same time. Our hands reached for the same plate. She let go first. "You look tired," she said softly, without the audience. "I look like myself," I said. She dried her hands and smoothed her dress. "Good, keep doing that." I met her eyes once more. "I intend to." She thought ending that conversation meant she'd won, but I'd only just started keeping score. 2 days after that kitchen standoff, the sunset pressed a warm glaze over my little balcony, turning the church steeple at the end of the block the color of honey. I carried my laptop outside and set it on the small iron table where I usually kept herbs. The basil had bolted in the heat. The air smelled faintly of rain even though the sky held. I told myself I would write one clean page. No flourishes, no pointed digs, just the truth I'd spent too long keeping quiet. I scrolled past the photos I had taken over the years without thinking they mattered. Oil changes logged on sticky notes. The dash lit up on a winter morning after another job went nowhere. The dent on the back bumper from the time I misjudged a post at the grocery store and laughed alone in the car, proud that I could pay for the repair myself. Finally, I paused on the image I knew had to be the first. The Buick parked on Sullivan's Island at sunrise, sand brushing the tires like surf, the old military plates squared to the dawn. I could still hear the gulls and the low hush of the tide. It wasn't a glamorous shot. It looked like a life you had to choose every day. I opened a new post and started with what that car had seen of me. More than miles, it had measured my beginnings. I wrote about the afternoon on base when the commander handed me the keys and said a person has to carry her own road forward when folks keep moving the markers. I wrote about learning to change a tire in the rain because the service station closed early, about getting my first big client and taking the long way home just to feel the weight of possibility settle in. I kept names out of it, not because I was afraid, but because the point wasn't to expose anyone. The point was to honor what had steadied me when the people who should have done it would not. The words came steady, not hot. I chose them the way you choose boards for a porch, one by one, checking the grain, knowing you will walk on them later. I mentioned the commander's habit of signing letters with "walk good." I explained the plates, why I had never swapped them for vanity ones even when friends suggested something cute. At the end, I wrote about gratitude and about duty that doesn't stop when the uniform does. I tagged the local Veterans Association and, before I could lose my nerve, I hit publish. For a long breath, nothing happened. Then the screen blinked, and a name I didn't know left a simple note. "Thank you for remembering us." Another told a story about a grandfather who kept a battered pickup because he'd hauled his best friend home from a farm accident in it. Someone else recognized the plates and said the commander had once bought coffee for every recruit on a rainy training day just to keep their hands warm. I didn't answer each comment, but I read every line. It felt like listening to a choir tuning up, one voice at a time finding its place. The sliding door whispered open behind me. Marlene stepped out with 2 mugs of tea, set them down, then peered at the screen over the top of her reading glasses. She read quietly for a while, the way nurses do, measuring pulse more than volume. When she finished, she squeezed my shoulder. "That," she said, "is how you speak without shouting." "I wanted it to be about him," I said, "not about them." "It is about him," she replied, "and it's about you. You didn't hide. You told the truth kindly. That travels farther than anger." She went back inside to stir whatever she had in the oven. On the street below, a boy pedaled by with a fishing rod jutting from his backpack like a mast. Comments kept stacking. A retired chaplain offered a blessing. A woman wrote that her mother used to wave at the commander from the elementary school crosswalk, and he always waved back. I hadn't expected it would feel like this quiet recognition weaving between strangers like string lights. When the phone rang, the name on the screen cut through the evening as cleanly as a knife. I let it buzz twice and took the call. "So," Vera said, sweetness poured over ice, "I see you've decided to make things public." "I wrote about a car," I said, keeping my voice low, "and a man who believed in service. You tagged people. Do you know what that looks like with the wedding coming up? It looks like you're trying to embarrass the family." "The truth doesn't embarrass anyone," I said, "not unless they've been rolling in something they don't want seen." She exhaled into the phone, but it wasn't a laugh. "You always did enjoy playing the martyr, Callista. Everyone knows you cling to old things because you can't move on. Now you're dragging veterans into your narrative to make it noble." "You're welcome to your opinion," I said, "but this isn't about you." "It becomes about me when people start asking questions," she snapped. "Brent just texted that a couple of our guests shared your post. You could have spoken to me privately if you had concerns." "I tried speaking to you," I said, remembering the kitchen, the bright counters, the way she lifted her chin when she told the room I wasn't going to the beach. "You prefer an audience." Silence stretched across the line, thin but strong. I could hear, faintly, a drawer closing at her house, the hum of a refrigerator like mine, the life of a person who believed control could hold off truth. Then her voice returned, cooler. "If you intend to continue this little campaign," she said, "don't expect me to help clean up the mess." "I don't need your help," I said. "And there's no mess in honoring where I come from." "Where you come from," she repeated, each word brittle. "You're rewriting history." "No," I said, softer than I felt. "I'm finally telling mine." She hung up. No goodbyes, not even a warning. Just the blunt end of a call that had never been a conversation. I laid the phone face down. The sky had gone from honey to deep blue. The first star showed through the gap between 2 rooftops like a nailhead in a plank. Inside, the oven dinged. Marlene tapped the glass with a knuckle and called my name. I took the post in again, from the top to the last line, testing it as if it were a bridge I'd built myself. It held. The comments kept coming, but they were not the point. The point was that I had chosen the table where the story would be told. No one had shoved me to a side chair tonight. A group photo from years ago surfaced in my suggested memories, all of us in summer clothes on the steps of the church. Back then, I had stood on the edge, head tilted, already half outside the frame. I closed the window and let the memory pass. Sometimes distance is a kind of health. When the evening cooled enough to taste, I carried the mugs inside and washed them, one by one, feeling the warmth leave the ceramic. I dried my hands and checked the locks as if we were expecting a storm. I didn't know exactly what form Vera's answer would take, but I knew the energy in her silence. It was not surrender. It was the sound of a fuse being lit. The parking lot outside the community center held the leftover heat of the charity cookout. Folding tables clacked shut. A flag came down with careful hands. I parked in the back row and walked in slow, letting my pulse settle. Mr. Howard spotted me first and lifted 2 fingers in greeting. Denise, still wearing her name badge, waved me over. We met by the curb with paper cups of lemonade. "That post of yours, Mr. Howard said, gentle and sure. "Your commander sounded like the kind of leader folks measure years by. He gave me the road when I didn't have one," I said. Denise patted the folded printout sticking from her pocket. "I read it to my dad last night. He didn't speak once. That's a miracle at our house." We stood in an easy quiet, the kind that doesn't need polishing. Then the quiet changed. Vera's voice arrived before she did, bright and shaped for audiences. She stood a few steps away with Brent and a small knot of listeners, sunglasses perched on her head like punctuation. "All I'm saying," she told Mr. Howard's back, "is that it's convenient to remember people once they're gone. Attention is a strong currency online. Some folks will spend any name to get it." Denise's jaw set. "Mr. Howard turned. Brent glanced at me, then away. I stepped beside them. "If there's something about me that needs saying, I prefer to be present for it." Vera pasted on a smile. "We were just praising your lovely essay." "So heartfelt, so timely." "Timely," I said. "Meaning what?" "Meaning some stories come out right when the teller wants them to. Makes it hard to tell tribute from performance." "You're implying I use my commander's name to get attention." "I didn't use that word," she said. "Other people might." Denise's voice cut clean. "If you have a concern, say it plain." "I'm not here to argue with rumor," I said. "I'm here to lay down the record." From my tote, I pulled a plastic sleeve and slid out a page on yellowed letterhead. The ink sat heavy in the downstrokes, the loops deliberate. I held it to the light. "He wrote this after my logistics rotation," I said. "He kept a copy." So did I. "Mr. Howard took the letter with both hands and read without hurry. When he finished, he nodded once, almost to himself. "That's his hand, no doubt." Denise leaned in. "The way he describes you, that isn't a shout-out. That's a commendation." Vera tried to laugh. "Anyone can type a note and print a signature." "It isn't printed," I said. "Look at the pressure at the curve of the Y, the thin line where he paused to think." Mr. Howard smiled at the detail. "He did that. Took a breath right where most men rush." Denise turned to Vera. "Do you have anything from him that says otherwise?" Vera opened her clutch and found air. Brent rearranged his face into neutral. "Words keep," I said. "Even when the writer is gone. I've kept mine and tried to live under them. That's all the attention I want." I slid the page back into its sleeve. Around us, the loading crew rolled a cart of chairs toward the storage room. Someone's dog barked twice and then decided we weren't worth it. Mr. Howard shook my hand. "Thank you for bringing the sun," he said. "It doesn't always visit these gatherings." "I'm glad you came," Denise told me. "If anyone has a problem, they can bring proof, not posture." Vera adjusted sunglasses that no longer had sun to fight. "I'm thrilled we cleared that up," she said, smile pressed thin. "We all care about legacy. We just disagree on methods." "We do," I said. I could have stayed to celebrate the moment. Instead, I said my goodbyes and walked the long way around the building past the mural the kids painted last summer. The air carried charcoal and cut grass. My steps sounded even. That steadiness felt like a new muscle. At the back row, the Buick waited where I'd left it. A leaf skated across the windshield, trying for the wiper blade and missing. I put my palm on the hood and let the metal cool my hand. The commander would have answered a rumor the way he answered weather, by doing the work in front of him until the cloud moved on. Across the lot, Vera's voice rose, then thinned as Denise replied, and Mr. Howard laughed. The sound reached me as shape more than meaning. I got in, closed the door, and let the quiet lay over me like a clean sheet. There will be a next thing, I told myself. People who trade in spectacle don't stop when the audience learns the trick. They build a bigger set. They dim the lights. They invite new witnesses. That's all right. I've learned to see in the dark. I pulled forward. Vera stepped off the curb as if to intercept me, then thought better of it. She gave a small wave that belonged to cameras. I answered with a nod that belonged to work boots and Monday mornings. At the exit, I paused for a pickup to pass. Its taillights melted into the late sun. Silence, when it knows itself, can be louder than shouting. It empties a performance of power. It marks the end of a story somebody else has been telling about you. I turn toward the river, where the wind keeps its counsel and the tide minds its duty. Behind me, a fuse burned shorter. Ahead, the evening weighed what it would bring. I met both with the same answer. I would not be pushed out of my own name again. Monday broke clear and cool, the kind of Charleston morning that pretends summer never happened. The cafe on the corner of Rutledge and the park was already humming, espresso hissing, chairs scraping, the soft shuffle of early risers who liked their news with steam. I pushed the door open and the bell announced me like a tiny trumpet. Heads lifted. Conversations dipped. It wasn't a silence, not exactly, more a rearranging of noise so I could hear what I was meant to hear. I ordered black coffee and stood near the pastry case long enough to feel the weight of a dozen sideways glances. 2 men from the association sat by the window with folded newsletters. They looked past me the way people look past an ambulance on the highway, curious but pretending not to be. I smiled anyway. My grandmother used to say manners are armor when you can't carry anything heavier. Denise appeared at my elbow as if she'd been sent. "Got a minute?" she asked, voice low. "Always," I said, and we stepped into the narrow hallway by the restrooms where the air smelled like lemons and mop water. "There's talk," she said, "about money missing after the charity drive. Someone's saying you signed out a bundle of cash. The story is moving fast." "Someone," I repeated, though we both knew her name. "And the proof?" Denise winced. "I haven't seen it, but the people repeating it say it came from your sister." I let my eyes close for one breath, then opened them on purpose. After the last meeting, Vera offered to help with photos and scooped up the envelopes from the table. "Do you remember?" "I do," she said. "I also remember you asked me to lock the rest in my trunk, which I did." "Then that's our chain of custody," I said. "We'll follow it." We returned to the main room. Mr. Howard was standing now, too polite to make a scene, but too rattled to stay seated. "Callista," he called, lifting a hand. His voice always carried the gravel of time. Today it had a crack in it. "Can we speak a moment?" "Of course." I crossed the room in a straight line, coffee in hand, and gave him the respect of looking directly into his eyes. "Good morning." Vera materialized as if conjured by the heat of our breath. She wore a cream blouse and a face ready for camera. "We all want what's best for the association," she said, before anyone had asked for her opinion. "That's why this is so delicate." "Let's be careful with that word," I said. "Delicate tends to excuse a lot of bad behavior." Mr. Howard cleared his throat. "I've been told there's a discrepancy, a withdrawal slip with your name, dated the morning after the event. It's probably a misunderstanding, but I need to ask." Vera reached into her tote and produced a photocopy, edges too clean, toner too dark. She placed it on the table as if it were a wounded bird. My name sat there in shaky cursive that didn't belong to my hand. The date was correct. The time was not. The bank branch address had a typo, a single letter flipped, one of those details a forger misses because they're breathing too fast. "I didn't sign that," I said, calm enough to hear the coffee machine hiss behind me. "And our funds weren't deposited at this branch. Denise, you and I took them to the one on Calhoun, remember? The teller with the blue scarf. The one who volunteers at the shelter." Denise nodded slowly. "She knows our faces." "Also," I added, tapping the page lightly, "I never use my middle initial on bank forms. That habit is at least 15 years old." Vera made a sympathetic pout. "Stress can make anyone forget their habits," she offered. "We just want to clear this up." I reached into my bag and pulled out the envelope I'd brought for something just like this, a copy of the deposit receipt from the Calhoun branch, time-stamped with the teller's employee number and the sum matching our ledger. "Here's where the money went," I said. "The association's treasurer has the original. I'm happy to authorize the bank to release footage from the lobby cameras. Denise's trunk camera would show us leaving the lot together after the meeting, and the community center has hallway cameras that caught who handled the donation table at closing." One of the men by the window shifted in his chair. The other rubbed his jaw and looked at Vera's photocopy the way a hunter looks at cheap camouflage. Mr. Howard studied the receipt in my hand, then glanced at the photocopy again. I recognize that teller number, he murmured. She helped me open an account for my grandson. Then let's make this simple, I said. I request a private audit starting today. Denise and you can conduct it with me present. We'll review the deposits, the sign-out sheets, and any video available. When we're done, send a summary to every member by tomorrow evening. I'll sign whatever consent the bank needs. Vera touched the paper with 2 fingers as if it might burn. No one's accusing you, Callista. We're just being careful, I finished. Yes, let's be careful and thorough. I kept my tone steady, like holding a level through an earthquake. This association stands on trust. It can't be shaken by photocopies. Denise slid the fake document back toward Vera. Where did you get this? She asked, not unkindly, not loudly, just the way a nurse asks a patient where it hurts. Vera's smile wavered. A concerned member dropped it by my house. Then please ask that concerned member to speak directly to the board, I said, and to bring the original. Photocopies don't bank. The 2 men by the window nodded in the synchronized way of people who have already decided what they think but are waiting for a cue to say it. Mr. Howard cleared his throat once more. We'll do the audit, he said. Today. Thank you, I replied. I'll be available. I took a sip of coffee that had gone lukewarm and found it better than I expected. Temperature isn't everything. Sometimes it's the steadiness of your hand that matters. I turned to leave and caught my reflection in the bakery case glass, shoulders square, mouth set to neutral. My heart felt like a drum held under a coat, beating quiet and hard. On my way to the door, I passed Vera's table. She watched me with the bright caution of a cat whose paw is stuck but who refuses to admit it. Her lips tipped up in a private little smile that said this was only round 1. Enjoy your day, I told her, as if we were sisters in an ordinary kitchen, borrowing sugar. Always do, she replied, eyes glittering. Outside, the light had sharpened, the park bright as a postcard. I let the door swing shut behind me and stood in the clean air long enough to count to 5. My phone buzzed. Messages from members thanking me for handling things the right way, more polite than warm, but leaning the right direction. I typed replies without adjectives. The audit would speak for me. I walked to the curb where my Buick waited, paint clean, plates catching the morning. I put my palm on the hood the way you greet an old friend and felt the calm settle into place. Vera believed in crowds and volume and speed. I believed in paper, dates, cameras, and patience. We each had our weapons. If she wanted a war, I'd give her one, but on my terms. By the time I pulled into the community hall lot, the sun had slipped behind the live oaks and the cicadas were tuning up like a rusted choir. I'd arrived early on purpose. I wanted a chair near the front, a clean sightline to the board table, and a quiet minute to breathe. I carried a slim blue folder under my arm and a flash drive on a short lanyard, the plastic warm in my palm. Inside, the fluorescent lights hummed, rows of metal chairs already half full. There were the familiar sideways glances, the hush that swells when a door closes. I set my folder on the front row, nodded to Denise, and took my seat like a woman who had packed more than paper. The board called us to order with the usual pleasantries, but the room felt like a storm cellar, thick with what everyone already knew. Mr. Howard sat in the middle, reading glasses low, pen poised. Vera stood along the side aisle in a white blouse that flashed under the lights, one hand on her hip, the other carrying her smile. She didn't look at me, which meant she was watching everyone else. When the agenda reached new business, I rose. I did not clear my throat or apologize for the time. I introduced myself for the record, then said I wanted to address the rumors about mishandled donations and the document that had been circulated with my name. Simple words. Short sentences. It settled the room enough to hear the zip of my folder opening. I laid out the chain of custody first. I described the envelopes collected after the charity drive, the point at which they were handed off for counting, the deposit slip from the bank with its timestamp and teller initials. I kept my voice even, not giving Vera anything she could call drama. Then I held up a color copy of the suspicious receipt, the one that had slithered through texts and whispers. "This is the piece that doesn't match," I said. "And here is why." I plugged the flash drive into the board's laptop. The board secretary shifted her chair, and Denise moved to the projection cart with me. On the screen, a simple window appeared. Document properties, creator, last saved by, date and time. The words looked almost boring, which felt like a small blessing. I enlarged the field so even the back row could see them. Creator, I read. Vera Malis. I didn't look her way yet. Last saved by Vera's MacBook. I let the date hang in the air long enough for people to do the math. It matched the afternoon Vera had stopped by the association office to help tidy the paperwork, a detail I had documented in my notes after the cafe ambush. Next came the printer log I'd pulled with the secretary present. A single-page print job to the hall's shared printer from a laptop that had identified itself on the network as Vera MB. The hour and minute aligned with the metadata. A small sound went through the chairs, not quite a gasp, more like air leaving something that had been overinflated. Mr. Howard leaned forward, his eyes flicking from the screen to the paper in my hand. "That looks like his handwriting," he had said about the commander's letter in the parking lot days ago. Now he just pressed his lips together and nodded once, a man who knows the difference between smoke and fire. I finally turned toward Vera. To her credit, she didn't flinch. She lifted her chin. "Anyone can put anyone's name on a file," she said lightly. "You're not a tech expert, Callista. This is honestly harassment. And I hate to say it, but people have been talking about you for a while, about boundaries, about certain relationships that aren't appropriate." The last word was tossed like a match. The room split into murmurs that prickled the back of my neck. I could feel the old reflex rise in me, the one that wants to list every reason a lie is a lie. I steadied my hands on the folder and let the board chair call for quiet. "If we could stick to the documents," Denise said, voice crisp, "and to the funds." Vera smiled at the board, all teeth and sympathy. "Of course, but context matters. When someone craves attention enough to exploit a veteran's memory, it's hard not to see patterns elsewhere." My mouth opened, and then another voice cut across the aisle. It startled me because it belonged to a cousin who had barely spoken to me at the cookout, one from my uncle's side who always hugged quickly and left early. "I've heard things too," she announced, clutching her purse with both hands. "About the car, about why she keeps bringing it up. Maybe this isn't about honor. Maybe it's about holding on to the past because the present isn't going her way. It shouldn't have hurt. It wasn't even original. But hearing it from family in a room packed with neighbors and board members felt like a small door slamming shut. For a heartbeat, I saw the driveway, the laughter, the smirk that had started all of this. I let the feeling move through me and out, the way I was taught to breathe through a stitch in my side. I faced the board again. "I am not here to debate my character with people who prefer rumors to records," I said. "I am here to ask for a vote to open a formal inquiry into the forged receipt with the logs and metadata you've just seen preserved by the secretary. I will submit my bank statements and correspondence to the committee in full. I request the same of any party who handled donation materials in the time period shown on the screen." Vera laughed softly. "A committee? You want to drag this through months of meetings to keep your name in the air. That's transparent." "What's transparent," Denise said, "is a document that tells us who made it and when." Her glance slid to Vera and didn't move. Mr. Howard set his pen down. He didn't address me or Vera at first. He looked at the screen and then out at the neighbors, people we all had to see at the mailbox and in the checkout line. "I move we vote to open a formal inquiry," he said. "Limited scope, preserve the digital evidence, interview involved parties, report back next month." The motion was seconded. Hands went up. Some stayed stubbornly down. It passed, not by a landslide, but by enough. I felt the tightness in my shoulders ease a notch. An inquiry is not a verdict. But truth, once given a path, tends to keep walking. Vera's eyes found mine at last. They were bright with something sharper than anger. "You've been trying to make me look like a villain since we were kids," she said, low enough that only the first rows heard it. "You think hiding behind that car and a dead man's letter makes you noble? It just makes you small. I met her stare and felt the old heat bank to coals. What makes me small is rising to bait, I said. So I won't. I closed my folder and stepped back from the microphone. The committee will have everything it asks for. I suggest you prepare the same. On my way to my seat, the cousin who had spoken against me wouldn't meet my eyes. Denise touched my sleeve, a brief anchor. Behind us, a neighbor started talking about parking permits as if the air had not changed. It struck me then how ordinary life insists on continuing even when a bomb has been planted under the floorboards. When the meeting adjourned, people filed past with those careful smiles Southern folks wear when they don't want to get any on them. Outside, the evening had cooled. The live oaks threw long shadows across the lot. I stood by my car for a moment, fingers on the metal warmed by daylight, and listened to the murmur of crickets. In the glass of the hall doors, I could see Vera's reflection framed by bright lights, surrounded, still performing. Maybe she thought the vote was a stall. Maybe she thought the cousin's jab had stuck. Maybe tonight had bought her time. I pressed the flash drive back into its case and slid it into my pocket. Time was fine with me. Time makes truth heavier. It sinks through the noise until it hits bedrock. I started the engine and let the radio stay off, the rumble steady in my chest as I pulled away from the curb. The board may have been swayed tonight, but the truth hadn't even begun to burn. Saturday morning arrived quiet. I brewed coffee and tried to pretend the night before had been a bad dream. When the knock came, it startled the mug in my hand. I opened the door to Denise and Mr. Howard, both in weekend clothes, both carrying expressions that eased the ache behind my eyes. Denise held a manila folder. Mr. Howard had a tin of biscuits like a peace offering. "We just came from an emergency session," he said, stepping inside. "The board reconvened first thing." My stomach tightened, then loosened as Denise's smile reached her eyes. "They reviewed everything again," she said. "The login logs, the bank confirmation, the timestamps on the forged receipt. It wasn't close. The vote was unanimous in your favor." I did not realize I had been holding my breath until I heard it leave me. I leaned against the counter and nodded. "Thank you for not giving up on me." Mr. Howard shook his head. "You earned better than what happened. We needed to correct the record." He set the tin down. "And to apologize." Before I could answer, another knock. One of the neighbors who had spoken loudly at the meeting stood on the threshold, hat in hand. "I was wrong," he said. "I let talk steer me. I'm sorry." I accepted because it was offered straight. Denise slid the folder toward me. Inside was the board's decision, a statement clearing my name and recommending new safeguards for handling donations. On top sat a copy of the audit request I had made in the cafe. I ran my thumb over the stamp and felt steadiness return. We talked logistics, the dull kind. Then they left me with the biscuits and a living room full of sun. I stood there listening to the quiet and thought of how fast a rumor can scramble a life and how slowly truth walks it back. On my way to the dumpster, I saw her. Across the lot, Vera stood by the curb with her trunk open, boxes stacked on the pavement. She wore sunglasses, though the morning was gentle. She saw me and stiffened. A neighbor mentioned, as if to the air, that the community email had gone out at dawn, effective immediately. Vera had resigned from the Homeowners Association's Events and Communications Committee. The phrasing was polite, her stare was not. She slid a box into the trunk and closed it with a tidy, final sound. I went back inside and tidied. That is what you do when a storm pulls away. In a drawer I had not opened in months, I found a small keepsake box my mother left me. Under a folded handkerchief, there it was, a sealed envelope with my name in her hand. The sight of her script struck clean through me. I sat at the table and opened it. Her words were plain. She wrote about the way families mistake silence for peace and about resilience, not as armor, but as breath. "You do not have to stand in a fire to prove you can stand," she had written. "Step back when you must and carry the lesson, not the ash." I read it twice. Vera's glare drifted to the edges of my thoughts. My mother did not tell me to forgive or forget. She told me to decide what to carry. That felt like a light I could walk by. Denise lingered by the window and looked down at the street. You know, she said, the veterans group is planning a memorial cleanup next month. If you want to bring that car, I think folks would like to see it. I smiled because the invitation wasn't about spectacle. It was about place. Mr. Howard pushed the tin toward me, and we laughed at nothing in particular. It sounded normal. After they left, I signed the statement for the file and slid it into a plastic sleeve. The board would separate duties, require 2 signatures for withdrawals, and keep digital logs in a shared drive. Sometimes it takes a bruise to learn where the edges are. Back at the table, I studied my mother's letter again. She had dated the top corner months before she passed. When the world grows loud, she wrote, lower yours. Speak on purpose. People hear better when you are steady. She admitted she had not always lived that way and hoped I would. The honesty reached me more than any blessing could have. Through the blinds, palmetto fronds made soft shadows on the wall. Outside, someone walked a dog and waved. The ordinary rhythm of the block kept going, proof that my life was wider than last night's room. I slipped the letter back into the box and put it within reach. I made another cup of coffee and texted Denise a thank you. Her reply promised the board would announce new procedures this week. I wrote a short note to the veterans who had messaged me, telling them the truth had been set right and that I was grateful for their trust. One man wrote that the commander I had honored would be proud. I believed him. By late morning, the apartment had put itself back together. I sat in the chair by the window. The old car key lay on the table, its metal warm from the sun. I turned it over in my palm, not as a relic to defend, but as a reminder that the road forward is made by what we choose. I knew Vera's story with me might not be finished. Some people make a home in grievance. But I did not have to live there with them. I could visit my own life instead. The work that still needed doing, the friends who had stood steady, the small rituals that keep a day honest. I let the morning settle, but in the stillness, I felt a shift, as if the past had finally loosened its grip. Sunday afternoon settled over the park in a wash of gold. I had nearly talked myself into staying home when Denise called. Put on a sweater and meet me by the footbridge. I slid my mother's letter back into its envelope, tucked it into my bag, and went. The park sits at the edge of our neighborhood, a strip of grass and water where families feed ducks and joggers count laps. Denise waited under a maple. Beside her stood a man in a wool coat with the patient posture of someone who listens for a living. Callista, Denise said, this is Thomas. He organized communities up and down the coast, retired from the mileage, not from caring. Thomas offered a modest smile. I've heard about your week, he said. You kept your head when plenty would have lost theirs. He nodded toward a bench by the pond. Walk with us? We followed the path through crisp leaves. Thomas didn't interrogate me. He told brief stories, a neighborhood mended after a zoning fight, a small town that learned to publish spending and stop whisper campaigns. The theme was simple: sunlight helps. People think change is fireworks, he said. Most days it's switches flipped and rooms kept dark. Sometimes the darkest room is your own living room, I said. He inclined his head. Denise tells me you write clearly and don't scare easy. There's an initiative forming at the state level, listening sessions, training for neighborhood boards, a pilot to standardize financial practices. We need someone who can translate heat into light. Before I could answer, Mr. Howard joined us, hat in hand. He looked older now that the crisis had passed. I owe you more than a handshake, he said. I questioned you at the cafe. Then I watched you bring proof without rubbing anyone's nose in it. After that, I made calls. I asked the bank to speed the statements. I had my nephew preserve the logs. I pushed for the emergency session. He shook his head. Should have told you sooner, but the point was to do the work, not be thanked for it. Something eased in my chest, a knot I had worn so long it felt permanent. Thank you, I said. The words were small and full. Denise touched my elbow. You were never alone, she said. Some of us just needed to find our footing. Thomas cleared his throat. Here's why I'm here. The initiative needs a community lead for the coastal region, part-time to start. You'd run listening sessions, work with associations like yours, and show folks how to document, share, and resolve conflicts before they grow teeth. There's a stipend, travel money, and a good team. I think you'd be dangerous in the best way. Dangerous. The word surprised me, then settled like a new key on an old ring. I pictured my small apartment and manageable routine. Then I pictured rooms where people talked past one another and the air could change if someone kept a steady voice. I remembered the envelope in my bag, my mother urging courage without using the word. "What if I fail?" I asked. "Then you'll fail among people who have failed before and kept going," Thomas said. "Besides, you've already done the job in the hardest place, your backyard." We paused by the rail. A goose carved a quiet path through sunlight. Mr. Howard leaned forward, plain-spoken. "I'll help however I can," he said. "If you step into this, I'll show up and stay late. I can introduce you to treasurers along the coast who'd welcome a clear process." "And I'll bring coffee," Denise added. "Good coffee shortens bad meetings." Their small promises steadied me more than any speech. That's how stability returns. A hand on your elbow, a chair pulled up next to yours. I thought about the hours I'd spent proving a simple truth while lies tried to outrun it. I didn't want the rest of my life to be spent answering to the smallest voices in the room. The offer wasn't an escape from what had happened with Vera. It was a path that ran past her shadow and kept going. If I took it, I would have to give up the comfort of being underestimated. People would look to me when the temperature rose. They would expect me to be the grown-up, even when I felt like a beginner. Thomas handed me a folder. Inside were dates for the first listening session 2 counties over, a short description of duties, and a statement of purpose. Teach people how to govern themselves so nobody gets to be the villain for long. I closed the folder, the gold light thinned. A child laughed behind us, and the sound reminded me of the driveway laughter that used to sting. Now it drifted past me and faded. "I won't ask for an answer on the spot," Thomas said. "Sleep on it. Call me tomorrow either way." We walked back toward the bridge. At the curve of the path, Mr. Howard shook my hand. Denise hugged me like an older sister who had decided, finally, to take my side. I stayed after they left. I sat on the bench with the folder on my knees and the letter in my bag and watched a single leaf loosen from the maple. It turned as it fell and widened a ring no bigger than a wedding band when it touched the water. I could feel the weight of both fear and possibility pressing on my chest, waiting for me to choose. Morning came in softly, laying a pale band of gold across my kitchen table. The lace curtains breathed with the November breeze, the kettle clicked off, and I let the ritual steady my hands. I poured coffee, opened my journal, and faced Thomas's offer like a sealed envelope. Statewide work, real influence, a chance to turn what I'd survived into something useful. I wrote 3 words. What scares me? The list was ordinary. Failing, travel, rooms full of strangers who might look at me the way Vera had trained people to look at me. Under it ran a quieter fear, outgrowing the life that held me when things were ugly. The apartment, the park, neighbors who waved. How do you loosen your grip on a place that stayed when people didn't? The phone rang. Unknown number, out of state. I answered anyway. "This is Callista." "Still steady on the second ring," a calm voice said. "You never like to make folks wait." My breath hitched. "Colonel Maddox?" Years ago, I'd worked under him on a community project for veterans. When he retired, he slipped into quieter corners. "I heard a little of your storm," he said, "and what you did with it. Thomas is a good man. If you take that role, I'll make sure your first steps have a floor. I sit on a board now, small but loud in the right halls. We need someone who knows how to stand without shouting." I looked at the corkboard where Arthur's letter, the one from the man who gave me the Buick, hung by a brass tack. 2 voices from 2 pasts reached me at once. "I don't know if I'm big enough for it," I said. "You're not," he said, letting the silence breathe. "No one is at the beginning. That's why you grow. Say yes, and we'll catch you if the ground dips." When the call ended, the house made ordinary noises, the kettle ticking as it cooled, a delivery truck sighing at the curb, while a door I hadn't dared knock on swung open. A soft tap at the back door. Denise slipped in with the ease of someone who'd earned a spare key. She set a paper sack on the counter. "Croissants and nerves," she said, like a confession dressed up as breakfast. We ate standing up. "I didn't sleep," she admitted. "Kept thinking about yesterday, and what comes next for you." Her eyes went to the journal. "Are you going to take it?" "I'm leaning yes," I said, and told her about the call. She smiled, then swallowed it back. "That's wonderful," she said, and the word was heavy. She set down her cup. "Can I say the selfish part? Please." "I'm afraid you'll take off and forget the rest of us," she said. "Not on purpose, just grow past this little life where we swap tomatoes and share ladders. I love the thought of you stepping into something big. I'm just afraid of the space it might put between our front doors." The tenderness of it touched something raw. "You were at my sink when I was too tired to ask for help," I said. "No job changes that. If I go, I'll come back with stories and extra tomatoes." She laughed, eyes wet. "Hold you to it." After she left, I cleaned the kitchen with the attention you give a place when you might be saying goodbye. Then I sat with my mother's letter again, the one I found in the keepsake box. She wrote about courage as a daily thing, how sometimes it looked like telling the truth, and sometimes it looked like walking toward the thing that scares you until it stops being bigger than you are. I put the letter away and took my phone to the desk. Thomas's name glowed on the screen. My thumb hovered. I saw every room where Vera had directed the light to make me small, and then rooms that weren't hers to light. My heart steadied. I pressed call. He answered on the first ring. "Callista." "I'm ready," I said. "I'll take the role." "You just did," he said, smiling through the line. "Orientation in Columbia next week. I'll send details." "And Callista?" "Yes?" "Whatever they threw at you, pack it as ballast. It will steady the ship." When we hung up, I stepped outside. The air had a bite that woke the skin, the kind of cold that makes you stand straighter. The maple had let most of its leaves go. The ones that hung on rattled like soft applause. Across the street, Mr. Howard waved from his porch. I lifted a hand back, our ordinary exchange suddenly threaded with new meaning. I didn't feel lighter, so much as clearer, like someone had cleaned the window and I could finally see the same view with sharper edges. I walked to the Buick and ran my palm along the hood. "We're going farther," I told it. A neighbor walking his dog grinned. I grinned back. Inside again, I opened my journal beneath the morning's 3 words and added a 4th. "What calls me?" The list wrote itself. Build something sturdy for people pushed to the edges, teach the tools that saved me, turn the story Vera tried to use against me into a lantern I could place in someone else's hand. The day had only begun, but the hesitation that kept me pacing these rooms eased its grip. Fear and possibility were still there, but now they felt like 2 sides of the same coin instead of opponents. I closed the journal, reached for my coat, and opened the door. The air felt sharper, and so did I. The opera house gleamed like a promise the city intended to keep. Light spilled from chandeliers in warm pools, velvet curtains held their breath. I moved through the lobby in a simple black dress and the pearls my mother left me, the same quiet armor I had worn to smaller battles. Denise was waiting near the aisle, her smile steady as a handrail. Thomas stood farther back by a marble column, giving me the smallest nod. I nodded back. It was enough. This was the annual gala for the Community Resilience Council. The room was a bouquet of donors, neighborhood leaders, and the sort of people who learned each other's names from plaques. Conversations hushed as the MC introduced the program. When I took the stage, the microphone felt cool and impartial in my palm. "I was taught," I began, "that the loudest person in the room is not always speaking the truth. Sometimes the truth is the one waiting its turn." A few faces lifted. I talked about neighborhoods that repair themselves the way bone grows after a break, about veterans whose service continues long after their uniforms are folded, about how ordinary citizens keep faith when institutions falter. I did not say Victor's name, not yet. Victor stood near the front table, shoulders thrown back with the easy confidence of a man who had never worried about a chair being pulled away. Inspiring, he cut in, stepping forward as if invited, and exactly why the council has invested so much under my leadership. I held his gaze. Leadership means carrying weight that does not flatter you. I let the words hang, then clicked the remote. The screen behind me brightened with a simple timeline, dates and hour stamps in a neat row. At our last neighborhood dispute, I said, a forged receipt appeared. It nearly ruined a citizen's good name. Tonight, I want to show you where that forgery came from. I advanced the slide. An image of a document filled the screen, then shrank to reveal the data beneath it: file metadata, device ID, the time of creation. A murmur rustled through the seats. The file was authored here, I said, pointing to the identifier. On a laptop registered to a public relations contractor many of you know. A new slide. And here are the invoices that contractor sent for reputation work. Small amounts, frequent, directed to a shell vendor later reimbursed by the council's discretionary fund. Another slide. These messages connect the requests for that work from the council's chair to that contractor. The timestamps match the creation of the forged receipt to the minute. Victor's smile thinned. You're weaving innuendo into a tapestry, he said lightly. Reputation management is not a crime. We all know how rumors spread. Rumors do, I agreed. Fraud leaves fingerprints. The next slide showed a screen capture of the login logs from the contractor's device. The email handle was blurred for privacy, but the machine ID and location data were not. Gasps flickered like camera shutters. From the aisle, Vera shifted in her seat. She had dressed to be admired and included. The room no longer knew where to put its eyes. She stood as if the act itself would make her taller. This is a hit job, she said, voice bright and brittle. Everyone here uses consultants. Everyone here tries to protect the council. Protection is not the same as concealment, I replied, and I moved to the final sequence, a short clip of a screen recording. The cursor opened the forged receipt, then the properties panel, then a string that matched the device fingerprint we had already seen. The date and time aligned with the text on the next panel. Need it handled. It was not my voice, it was Victor's, captured in a voicemail he had left when he thought records were forever loyal. Silence landed hard. The legal advisor for the board stood without waiting to be announced. We will confer, she said, but no one left their seats. The room watched itself begin to change. Thomas stepped onto the stage and took the second microphone. Some of you know me, he said. Most of you know what I've done in other cities. Before I met Callista, I was already following a pattern here. Funds redirected for image work, then justified as outreach. We needed proof of how that pattern harmed real people. She brought me the missing piece, the chain from a forged document in a neighborhood dispute back to the same pipeline. We did not arrive at tonight by accident. I looked out and found Denise. She pressed her hand over her heart. Across the aisle, a few neighbors from the meeting where I had first been accused sat very still, the way people do when a wind finally dies and they realize how hard they have been leaning. Victor tried one last pose of reason. These files could be fabricated too, he said. Who among you here can read those codes and swear they are not? The legal advisor turned toward our table. Our independent auditor can, she said evenly. A woman in a gray suit raised her hand and gave a brief, crisp opinion. The evidence chain was intact. The metadata was consistent. The payments lined up. The committee had been misled. The board gathered at the foot of the stage. I stepped back with Thomas, the two of us breathing like people who had run a long way without spilling a drop. It did not take long. When they returned, the chair of the governance committee read the motion in a voice that carried all the way to the highest balcony. Effective immediately, the council removes Victor from his position. We will refer our findings to the appropriate authorities and institute a moratorium on contracting with the public relations vendor involved for a period of 5 years. Eyes drifted toward Vera. No one applauded. There are times a room chooses mercy by refusing spectacle. The committee chair turned to me. We asked Callista to serve as interim chair for 90 days. Your charge would be to restore transparency, complete the external review, and recommend reforms. She did not have to say we were starting tonight. The floor felt solid under my shoes in a way it had not for months. I accept, I said. This council belongs to the people who give it purpose. For the next 90 days, every ledger, contract, and meeting will be open. If we ask our communities to trust us, we will earn it the slow, honest way. Applause rose, not in a rush, but in a tide. As it swelled, Denise reached the edge of the stage and offered her hand. I took it. Her eyes were bright, not from victory alone, but from relief that the truth had finally stopped waiting its turn. On my way down the side stairs, I passed Vera. She avoided my face the way you avoid a mirror you are not ready to meet. I did not speak. I did not need to. In the lobby, the doors stood open to the cool night. Through the glass, I could see a sliver of street where my old Buick would be, paint catching whatever light the city had left. The car had carried me through a dozen kinds of weather. It could carry this too. Reporters clustered at a respectful distance, asking if I had a statement. Only this, I said. Neighbor to neighbor, if something like this ever happens to you, keep your records, keep your dignity, and keep going. The truth takes its time, but it knows the way. We stepped outside. The air tasted new. Denise squeezed my hand once more, and Thomas, for the first time since I had known him, looked unguarded. Above us, the marquee letters shone like a small constellation. I didn't just survive the fire, I learned how to command it. When the lights went down at the Opera House, I realized the real victory wasn't a title. It was learning that quiet courage can move a room and that truth, slow as it is, arrives right on time. If you're standing where I stood, here's what helped me. Keep your records, keep your dignity, and keep good people close. Speak plainly, even when your voice shakes. Set boundaries without apology. And remember, accountability and compassion can live in the same sentence. I learned that forgiveness isn't pretending harm didn't happen. It's choosing not to carry it any farther. I learned that communities heal when everyday neighbors refuse to look away. Have you ever felt written out of a story that should have included you? What brought you back in? If this story touched you, type 1 in the comments or tell me where you're watching from. If it missed the mark, say why, and tell me how you found this video. If you want more stories like this, about grit, grace, and the ordinary heroes next door, please subscribe to the channel so you don't miss what comes next. Your voice keeps this circle honest, and your presence reminds me why I speak at all.